Hey guys, this is a new video here. Kind of a little bit different topic than normal. Normally in the past videos I've done some last epoch stuff, but there are a couple of changes with the PoE League that I wanted to show. And the first one was kind of this Flask change. So currently, the elemental flasks grant less damage taken, which objectively is more powerful. However, the new mod is +5 maximum resistance, which situationally can be better. I'm of the opinion that it's better on a lower budget and weaker on a higher budget. However, for some builds, this is a buff. And specifically for aura stacking builds without legacy gear, so not in standard. Like currently this character is in standard right here. I think it's a buff for aura stackers. And that's because a lot of the way aura stackers are built now, they're going to go without shavs. So I think I have in my incredibly disorganized stash as usual, I have this old shavs I used to use. I actually got a really good deal on this many leagues ago. I think I got this for 10 div and then linked it myself. Anyway, that's a side point. The main thing is how aura stackers reach 90 res nowadays is typically with melding. So I used to play aura stacking every league until they nerfed melding after 3.18. But I've played aura bots every league since 3.13. So I know almost everything there is to know about the archetype, except for, well, obviously I don't know what I don't know, but except for maybe a couple of things, which I would be willing to admit if I found them. Anyway, the big thing with melding is that it sets your resistances equal, or your maximum resistance is equal to whatever the highest elemental resistance you have. And then it subtracts a lot of elemental resistance. Now that is how legacy meldings work. This is a really good legacy melding one. Well, the new ones roll also minus max res, between -4 and -6. Now, usually for most people, it's not too hard to get a -4. Like a -4 and minus like 72 or lower might cost you like a div to 3 div in the current league. So it's not impossible to get your hands on it. But the -4 max res is a huge downside because most aura stacking builds will maybe at most get to 3.0 times the effective auras. Now I have a level 21 purity of ice here because I don't need it to be 23. But if you scale your purities up to level 23, the maximum resistance grants you 5 on the aura, and then you multiply that by your aura effect. So if you're able to reach ×3 of the effective auras, 5 times 3 is 15. You get from 75 to 90 res. And if you can push to 3.2 times the effective auras, you get 16. Which means with melding, you're at 87 resistance, which is not enough. The stuff I had thought about before for solving that problem was like, there's this mastery. This is usually just 1 point. It's not too hard to get, but it only gets you to 88, which is still not enough. What you'd have to do after that is pick up a Militant Faith with a specific seed with the mana cost of skills and aura effect node that doesn't override Foresight or Leadership and can only overwrite Harrier here with the +1 maximum resistance if you have at least 150 devotion. Well, I think it's a maximum resistance or is it maximum LE? Well, it doesn't matter for this point anyway. And then that gets you to 89, which is still really not enough for me, which means you'd have to push to 3.4 times the effective auras, which is just, it's really hard. It's just hard. Barring having like an insane legacy chest like this or an insanely well-crafted like Eldritch influenced chest, it's just not really going to happen. Which is where these flasks come in. A lot of these are built with coruscating elixir, and you can run an Eldritch influenced chest with them, or you can run like your typical aura bot chest. Like this is kind of what you'd craft in the current league. This is a pretty reasonable aura bot chest, and you could definitely go for something like this now, because your course getting elixir or whatever elemental flask you choose to run, if you're for some reason running a wonky shav setup, will give you the +5 maximum resistance you need, and then you just make sure that your purity matches the type that's on your elemental flask. Now, additionally, there's a new belt like that it technically could replace Mage Blood. I used to think that Mage Blood is the de facto best belt for this. Well, it is the best belt for this build, but like I thought it was something you had to have to play the build, at least to have a reasonable degree of comfort with the build. And a lot of that is because of two things. The first thing is chaos resistance. So if you look at my character, I have like almost exactly capped. If I take this off, I am really hurting on chaos resistance. For a high budget build, 8% does not cut it. Additionally, with crit, with charges, I'm at 92, and then I think I have a rational doctrine with profane ground, should give me 100% crit. If I take this off, right, so 92 almost, go down to 63. Now, if you replace this with just a 150 crit chance diamond flask, you could expect to make up about half of that, which means you'd be sitting at around 77 to 80 crit chance, which is still good, but it's not going to be there on bosses, which is the main thing. This new belt could solve that problem. It gives you flask effect, so you'll have maybe 60 to 70% of the effect on your flask you would with a Mage Blood, but you get the utility flask charges every 3 seconds. Which, if that rolls up to 3 every 3 seconds, you might not ever have to run Mage Blood. And the big convincing thing with that is how I'm getting my charges for course getting elixir here. So what I do is I run this mastery. You have to run this mastery to give you uptime on your Righteous Fire. So I'll just show that real quick. If you have Righteous Fire on, and then we pop the course getting elixir, it turns off. And that's because we reached 1 life, and Righteous Fire just turns off if you reach 1 life. So you have to have this to deal with that. And these have increased charges gained, which helps your uptime, and then you run the Pathfinder Ascendancy. Yes, you waste an Ascendancy notable on Scion just to pick this up. It is that good with course getting elixir, because you don't have to run shavs anymore. With that belt, you would get the charge mod without having to run the Pathfinder Ascendancy, which means Scion becomes more negotiable, although I think it's still better than most of the other options, except for maybe like there's an argument to play Aurastacking on Occultist. Inquisitor is still definitely really good, and there's a couple other Ascendancies that are reasonable, but I still think Scion is better, specifically because of the Guardian, or the Guardian and the Necromancer combo. But honestly, it means you can go back to running Champion for the Aura effect. If that belt rolls, utility flasks gain 3 charges every 3 seconds. Now, there's still the fact that you could run both and get 6 charges every 3 seconds. I mean, it's a lot of overkill, but you'd have no problem sustaining your course getting elixir and any other flask that you'd like to run. Like, for example, I know Amethyst flasks are probably one of the harder flasks to sustain in the game. Quicksilvers are kind of reasonable. There's a couple flasks that have like they take 40 charges and they store 60. Let's see if I can find a base type like that here. I think Silver Flask is one of them. Yeah. So if you wanted to run a Silver Flask, you could do that more easily. Although, why would you do that over Onslaught Boots? I don't know. But yeah, I mean, the big thing is that the Pathfinder node here becomes more optional, as well as the max res from course getting elixir just would make the build come online at a 300 to 400 div budget as opposed to an 800 div budget. Because that's kind of where I've looked at it, as it becomes competitive with other builds at an 800 div budget, but it still would be one of the most inefficient builds to play. Like, you'd put 800 div into the build and maybe get a build that's actually as good as pretty much any other meta build you tried to play for 150 to 200 div. It's that bad. It would still be bad, but it wouldn't be 4 or 5 times worse. It'd only be 2 or 3 times worse, I think. That being said, it really depends on the price of that belt. If that belt is like 20 div, it's reasonable. If it's like Mage Blood, I mean, I don't see why it would be Mage Blood price, but if it is, then there's just no way, and you just play Mage Blood. Even then, 20 div might be really overpriced for that belt, but we'll just have to see how available they are and if there's any builds that are built around it. I suspect that there will be, because we've kind of moved away from the chevrons wrappings meta. I mean, if you look at the item, unless you get some pretty crazy implicits on it, it's pretty disappointing. It doesn't really have that much energy shield. You can get body armors with 800 energy shield on it, so if you're looking for energy shield, there's nothing there. Really, the only thing is the chaos damage taken, but that's gettable pretty much anywhere else for a lower opportunity cost, because body armors are just too good. I mean, this is a pretty crazy one because this has a bunch of legacy mods, but you can grab something like this. There are other things you can do. So, for example, you can get a grasping mail with 50% increased global defenses, and then after that, you can get Eldritch Aura implicits, and then kind of any other mods that would be good on there. For example, physical taken as Ellie is a pretty amazing mod to have. Even if you only have a little bit of armor, it still goes a long way as far as mitigating physical hit damage goes. There's just no reason to run shavs anymore, and the way I see it is you only had 20% less fire damage taken with Coruscating Elixir before with this build, which, while somewhat noticeable, it wasn't really that insane because you weren't scaling any Flask effect on it. And the max res just makes melding way easier to build into, which was already something that I would recommend building into on these kind of builds. So as far as that goes, that's the general idea for why this is a pretty sizable budget Aurastacking buff. If you guys want to see a more detailed video about how these builds work, or specifically how my character in Standard works here, despite the fact that you can't get most of the stuff I have on this character anymore, just let me know. I can make a video about that. I can also make a video about how to build aura bots. I've built many of them, some of them for even 10 div and lower, and some of them for, I think I've gone as high as like 1.5 mirror to 2 mirrors of budget before on an aura bot. Anyway, that's the main idea. Just a simple budget buff. Let's see you in the next one.